Today's meeting as a personal note. Several people saying, well, I read in the newspaper, Wesley, you might be interested to see what people are reading into what you write, that you're going to raise taxes. I said, who said that? They said, Wesley Young. I said, Wesley Young's not going to vote on that. And the fact is, I don't know anything about raising taxes today, but we are going to approach that subject. And we have a lot on our platter. We hope that everything works out. But this budget is for next year. And as I said a couple of times yesterday, the budget amounts to about $500 million. In other words, $500 million. But the premier sheets that were preliminary were handed out to the commissioners yesterday that said $531.88. Now, where that 88-cent figure came from, I have no idea. But that may be where Wesley got his figure for a tax increase. Just having fun with you, Wes. Now, having said that, the county manager is set, ready to go, and we'll turn the meeting over to
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members and staff and guests. We made a lot of progress yesterday. Got to a point where I believe we needed to really dive a little deeper into it to get the recommendations together. And so I spent some time yesterday evening wrapping things up. And so what I thought we'd do this morning is we can talk first about the base budget and the two options there. And as we have done in the past, Kyle, if Kyle can come up and he can just actually step through both options in detail and then talk about how they differ. That will become evident as he talks. We can then talk about fire tax districts and kind of where we are there. And then we do have sort of the draft, two parts of the ordinance, both with board-directed initiatives, things that kind of spun up out of the conversations that you had that we heard, and hopefully we've gotten those, and those really do kind of serve to be goals going into the next year. And then we also have the items for the PAYGO funding, which is part of the budget. It's particularly important this year because we do expect there to be some significant PAYGO funding just because of the nature of the economic cycle that we're in. So go through those and make sure they look good. At the staff level yesterday afternoon, we also stepped through the ordinance, which will be finally, that'll be what you actually vote on Thursday, tomorrow, if we find ourselves there. And so we're busily we normally don't change that much, but we do actually read it word for word as a group every year just to make sure it reflects everything that it should and that it's legal and it's really the document that you basically approved that guides operations for the year. So all that's going on. And then before we leave, I do want to talk a little bit about the structure of the action that will be taken tomorrow, because some state law, maybe Gordon can kind of dive in with it too, but state law has changed around requiring board members to recuse themselves from votes on certain things. So we're going to have this sort of additional complicated element. At the end of the day, we looked at it and don't think it's all going to be very difficult. It's just going to be the order you take things in. So we'll need to step through that as well. So
it's interesting you should say that, because yesterday someone was talking about, you're actually raising taxes. I said, pardon me? They said, you're doing a revals. I said, that's a state law. Well, you just tell them you're not going to do it. I said, you tell the state that you're not going to obey their law, and then what are you going to get? You're going to have reval no matter how you look at it. First thing you talk about today is revals and stuff like that. So
yeah, we were fortunate this year is not a revaluation year, and so if anybody says that that in your action you raise taxes, that would be untrue. The only areas that we're talking about a potential tax increase, I believe, are in some of the fire tax districts.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. So that's good. So I'll turn it over to Kyle to step through the two options in detail and interrupt. This is really where we're turning this budget into your budget, and so if you see something that doesn't look right, please let us know. So, Kyle.
Well, Kyle, before you begin, if I could, I noticed we have a director of our library in the audience, Brian Hart. Could we give him a moment to say good morning to us and hello before we get into the meat and bolts of our discussion? Is that okay, Mr. Chairman?
That's a great idea. He can actually come. You can come up to the front. You don't really have to wear your mask in here.
Well, absolutely, I do. Actually, I appreciate the thought. But yes, I've been I've been kind of battling COVID in my household.
Oh, my.
And so that's why I was unable to be present and accessible to address some of the concerns related to the ASLs that were.
Maybe it's a good idea you leave that mask on.
Yeah, I will do so. I will do so. That's wise counsel. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Commissioner Fleming, for Commissioner Elamine for allowing me an opportunity to come before the board. Thank you, Chairman Plyler, for agreeing as well. And I hope the Board of Commissioners are doing well this morning. I will be brief because I do understand that you all have discussed a lot of this ad nauseum, and I do not envy the workload that you all have before you and the task at hand, but I do appreciate it very much so. The primary reason for me wanting to come before you all and share some information is that the requests that we've submitted, there are 3 ASL requests that I believe you all are considering, and 2 of them in particular would really, although we do have some vacancies, as has been noted and addressed within the department, 2 of the positions that we're attempting to fill are not actually vacant classes in our department currently. And a lot of the positions that are currently vacant, we are in one phase or another of actually filling those positions. Those are active recruitments. And so, but they would not fill the void or the tasks that are being handled or would potentially be handled by the positions that we've requested. For instance, the fiscal technician position, which we have spoken with our internal audit manager at Dudley's behest, she also agreed that awarding at least one such position to the department would help greatly with our internal controls. The library is a sizable department. We have 10 locations, and though we might not necessarily handle the sum of money that some of the other departments, such as DSS, handle, we do have a great deal of contracts, a great deal of fiscal responsibilities. And, I pride myself and the department, we pride ourselves on stewardship. And so the addition of a fiscal technician would just really help us ensure that we are doing the best with the county's interests, with the county's support that we are already afforded. And then lastly, the library assistant positions that were requested would help greatly provide coverage and ensure that there are quality programs and offerings coming out of our branches. We currently have several locations, particularly East Winston, the Malloy Jordan Heritage Branch, that are really thinly staffed. And again, we do appreciate the support that we already receive from the county, so I don't mean to, suggest that we aren't funded well, because we appreciate it. However, they are very thinly staffed, and in the event that one staff member calls out, then we're almost threatened to have to close the branch unless we deploy and stretch resources really thin in order to staff it for that particular day. And so I don't mean to preach gloom and doom as it relates to that instance, but that is a possibility that we have to consider multiple times a week because of the fact that it's so thinly staffed. And we really feel strongly that by having a few more library assistants on our staff, that we'd be able to avoid those instances, and that the community and the customers who utilize the branch, the Malloy Jordan Heritage Branch, the Walkertown Branch, and one of the others, Rural Hall, that are also thinly staffed, we really feel like we would be smooth sailing moving forward. Lastly, I just want to point out a few things that we've done this year, because I don't come before you all often. So I just want to point out a few of the things that we've done this year, and I'll be finished. So this year, a couple of the notable accomplishments that we've been able to bring forth through some of the partnerships that we've entered into include the Class Access Program that we entered into with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools to allow students to have access to the public library resources through their student ID number. That was a notable accomplishment, and obviously you all played a hand in that as well, so I do appreciate that. Secondly, I would mention that we've helped with various stages and phases of the the county's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to me wearing a mask faithfully, we have also used various locations as test sites and as COVID test distribution sites, at-home distribution sites, and we will continue to explore opportunities to make sure that we are showing up for our county each day. And then we also support economic and workforce development here in the county through our computer training bridge program, as well as the nonprofit resource center, which our information services librarians provide recurring classes and events for the county in or out of. And then lastly, I would say one of the partnerships that I'm most appreciative of has been the relationship that we've had with many of you as we've been able to produce the Forsyth County at Work for You web series, which allows us to highlight the various departments and services that our colleagues across the county are bringing forth. And so we are actively working on things big and small, and we would appreciate your continued consideration on granting these couple of requests. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is
Thank
the
you.
second day in a row we've had a report from the library. That was very well done. Thank you
Chairman,
very
if
much.
I may address Brian while he's here, I wanted to again preface that I am a friend of the library, and I appreciate you with the more clarity today relative to what those vacancies look like, because that was troubling for me. I try to be physically responsible as well. So that's something that when I looked at this proposal previously before, I was unsure, but after your report today, it's something that I can support. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. If there are no other questions, I will return to my seat. Thank you all for your time and your effort.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. So I'll just go through the two options here that we developed as a result of our discussions yesterday. You should have a hard copy, but I've also put it on the Elmo, and I'll just kind of run through it. If you'll remember, the budget as it was presented to the commissioners a few weeks ago, we were at $531,235,946. And the items directly underneath here are mostly related to our discussions yesterday. And so essentially, some manager recommended alternate service levels are included here. And so the first one is the alternate service level for emergency services and EMS operations. And so their request was for 15 full-time EMT positions and 2 ambulances. And the recommendation is to fund half of that request to start in January, and then fund 1 ambulance with PAYGO dollars. And so the $218,848 is really the personnel cost, and and costs associated with personnel, not any of the ambulance or the equipment for the ambulance in that number. There were a couple recommendations for public health. One is a full-time position for the Healthy Forsyth coordinator. That is offset by some grant funding. And so the expenditure was $110,269 with the offset revenue of $100,000. And then there was also a recommendation for a full-time public health educator for the Hispanic Liaison Project at a cost of $72,994. There were 2 positions at DSS, and the managers recommended alternate service levels, 1 full-time fiscal technician and 1 full-time division director. And so you can see the expenditures and the offsetting revenue that we'll receive from for those 2 positions. We've got general services, and we've got it as a full-time maintenance technician, 1 position for grounds. I think that may end up. I think that we'll look at the possibility of contracting that with through ARCA or some other provider, but that position or that funding is in there for that. There's a full-time senior HR consultant with $75,499. It's all really the personnel cost. This next one, the airport ACE Academy. This was not a recommended alternate service level, but if you'll recall, I think at the last commissioner meeting, you appropriated or you allowed the acceptance of a grant for the ACE Academy of $3,000. That number was not included in our original number, and so we're really just adding the revenue and the expenditures for that grant here, and so that's really all that is. The Commissioner's Office has the county connections, the contract with Jim Longworth, and allows for 1 episode per month at $13,000, and then 1 full-time tax assistant for $45,584. And so then the other adjustments that are on this sheet, and they're on the option 2 sheet as well, but just so we can walk through them, around almost, it was right before 3 o'clock yesterday, I received an email from Kyle Haney, and there is, we had $294,300 included in this, in our original $531 million figure for a payment for for a parking deck. And really, the payment that we just made this year was the last payment. And so this $294,300 is we no longer need to budget it. And so we are subtracting that out of our expenditure column there, because we're not going to make that payment because it's no longer needed. And then when we were also kind of crunching some numbers, we went back, and so we realigned our occupancy tax revenue with the really with the TDA projection. And so that allows us to add about $50,000 of occupancy tax into the budget. And as part of our occupancy tax, we also receive some collection fees for it, and we essentially align that up as well. So there's another $25,000 in revenue for the collection fee. So when you take all of our expenditure additions and adjustments from yesterday, we got to a new figure of $531,701,583. And so to balance it, we appropriated $181,996 of fund balance. And so that's really the manager's adjusted recommended continuation budget is this $531,701,583. And then so option 1 would then really fund an additional $20,000 for a special appropriation for the Kernersville Auto Museum. And so we're appropriating additional fund balance there to cover that. And so option 1 gets you to a recommended budget of $531,721,583. The tax rate remains 67.78, which is the same tax rate as FY22. That should say FY23. Gosh, as many times as you look at these things. The FY23 tax rate will be 67.78. And that's really what option 1 comes down to.
The only thing I'd add to that, Kyle, is the commissioners who were interested in option 1 felt comfortable adding the Kernersville Auto Museum because the occupancy taxes increased. And so there was sort of that connection between that revenue source and the Kernersville Auto Museum's alternate service level request. So, thanks. That's all.
Sure. And so then with option 1, we also do have a board-directed initiative that would, bring an agenda item to the board once the fiscal year 22 has closed, just to bring additional items for consideration through PAYGO, possibly the opioid settlement funding process, and or the countywide overlay fire tax district.
And I can go, if you want to, I can go over that. We can deal with that with board-directed initiatives at the end. They are a little bit different between the two of them,
right.
but
Okay.
yeah, I think, yeah,
But that's option 1.
good job.
And so option 2, I won't go over everything that I just went over, because option 2, the very top part of option 2 is exactly what option 1 is. And so you get to this manager's adjusted recommended continuation budget of $531,701,583. And so what option 2 would do is essentially everything that option 1 was doing. And it would add an additional full-time public health educator for the Hispanic Liaison Project. It would add $100,000 for additional funding for in-home aid services through DSS. It would provide another $10,000 for senior services, $18,372 for a part-time office assistant at NC Co-op. And then for the library, there was 1 full-time fiscal tech and 2 full-time library assistants, and so you can see those expenditures there. And then we've got community economic development. There's an increase of $50,000 for Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., $5,000, an additional $5,000 for Piedmont Triad Film Commission. Those would be offset by additional fund balance. 226,272 is for the marketing office alternate service level, which would allow for a couple new positions for our marketing efforts. Boston Thurman Community Network would receive $100,000. And Children's Law Center would receive their request of $107,872 that came in. Those two would be, we've characterized them as these two, as well as the Winston-Salem Inc. and the Piedmont Triad Film Commission, as one-time payments offset by fund balance. And then on the second page, as we go through, you get Eliza's Helping Hands would receive $15,000. That'd be a new special appropriation. And so again, one-time offset by additional fund balance. Experiment in Self-Reliance would receive an additional $25,000. Guide would receive $100,000. That would be new. Harry Veterans would receive an increase of $5,000. The Humane Society would receive an increase of $11,715. Hustle Winston-Salem would be a new allocation that's $10,000. Kernersville Auto Museum is $20,000, which is new. Kerners Valley would receive $100,000, which is, again, that would be a new for FY23. $25,000 for My Brother's Second Chance, and $25,000 for Renolda House, and $13,750 for the Triad Minority and Women's Business Expo. Again, so these are all characterized as one-time offset by additional fund balance. And so the appropriation of additional fund balance is, well, all of these are offset by an appropriation of fund balance. And then when you add all those up, you get to, an adjustment of $1,173,201. And so in order to be balanced, we would appropriate an additional $559,864 on top of these other line items where we had shown a fund balance appropriation. It gets you to an adjusted budget for FY23 of $532,874,784, and again, our FY23 tax rate will remain at 67.78, the same rate as FY22. It's just essentially appropriating additional fund balance for these one-time appropriations.
Yeah, I think what I'll say about, and great job, Kyle, let me just add to this. So as we, clearly the commissioners who were interested in this were interested in not having a tax increase associated with it. As we looked at it, recognizing that about, I think it was $618,000 of these requests would come back to the board as special appropriations next year. And so they truly are of a one-time nature. Now, obviously, the folks who receive, some of these are capital, some of them are operational, but you'll likely see some of those come back next year. But you would not want to raise the tax rate for those one-time expenses anyway, and we're in this unique year that really allows this to happen, that we know appropriated fund balance, there's room there, particularly for one-time things. And so, both of these budgets, as we present them, I believe are fiscally responsible. Clearly the first one does not rely on fund balance as much, and so, so there's that. The second one, pushes more dollars out into the community, does rely on additional fund balance, but I feel comfortable that we'll have it. The challenge next year will be to kind of figure out how they fit in, whether we seem to get the same revenue growth that we've gotten. I don't expect that we'll be in the same kind of fiscal condition next year, just because we have increased revenues in the continuation budget. So I do expect it to be tighter, but this is absolutely possible in this year, and it was really made possible by the fact that we are we do go into this year in a good place.
So thanks to the fund balance, it's Christmas in June on option 2, right?
I wouldn't, however you want to characterize that is good, Mr. Chairman. So that is it. If you want us to go into more detail about what each of these requests do, I know y'all have had a chance to take a look at that. We're really just presenting you the numbers, but we'll be happy to go review them from an operational perspective. But with that, and then on the board director initiatives, we can talk about that when we get to that portion of it. But those are the two options for the base budgets that this board has developed based on the manager's recommended budget. So.
I have one comment I'd like to make, particularly related to, and I was actually talking to Commissioner Wizenhut yesterday about any kind of special appropriation to an alternative service level. And this, I think, I think it's worth some discussion because it impacts, if we did this, it would impact all alternative service level allocations to agencies that are non-county agencies, that every one of them would be required to provide an annual report that basically says, this is what we did with the money, this is what we accomplished, these are our outcomes, these are whatever. And I was thinking of, just for example, the chamber. So the chamber, or the Winston-Salem Business, Inc. Winston-Salem Business, Inc., for example, they've received their $185,000 as a part of our regular budget now because we've done it over 2 years. So once they became a part of our regular budget, they would not be required. But until they are a part of the regular budget, they should require, and it could be required to all of them, even those that are a part of our regular budget, to actually report what they did, and we can provide them a basic sort of form and guidance of what to provide, because it really suggests there needs to be accountability for every agency that receives any alternative service level money or any county money that's non-county.
Yeah, there's Greater Winston Inc.'s a little different because it's actually a contract for services. And so we actually are buying services from them around recruitment. So, and Kyle Haney actually monitors that contract and works with them. And so, but you're absolutely correct. If the ones that we characterize, and you can see it on that, it's almost the last page of the general fund budget, really are the special appropriations. And so for the special, I think what I'm hearing you say is for those special appropriations where there's not a contract, it's a grant agreement essentially. We require an annual report and
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. We do have what's called a grant agreement, but it is basically a contract that goes out to all of these special appropriations, and they are required to report. They're required to report as is set forth in the grant agreement. That would be either quarterly or at least annual report on what's done with the money. And we're working to upfront basically state what they're going to do with the money and then make sure they've done it. So it'll be akin to the ARPA money.
Which I think is great, and it'd be, if once those are like collected, it'd be, I'd love to see them, like to see in a little booklet at the end when they're all online or something, not where you have to go look at each one separately, but where they're in one place and you could look at all of those, at one time. That would be good. That would provide some accountability. And I'm glad that the past has provided those contracts. So that kind of gets back into the Winston-Salem Business, Inc. If it's a contract, it looks like all of them become contracts. Am I?
They do, and that contract also does include reporting.
Good. And just like the additional, if it were approved, the additional $50,000 in option 2 that would go to them, for example, they would particularly explain, in this one, what they did with that extra dollars. What they did with the first dollars, $185, and what did they do with the extra? Because there's got to be, if there were no positions, additional capacity developed, then that's not meeting the needs of what the intent was, to begin with. And so anyway, yeah, I think that's good. And
I'll just add, Mr. Vice Chair, another area of complexity is we want to make sure that these organizations are not double dipping. So if they're getting ARPA money and they're getting special appropriation money, that will need to be used for different services, not the same service.
Got it. Thank you. I
Mr. Chairman,
appreciate that.
I don't know when you're getting ready to vote, but before you get ready to vote, I want to request a recess for a half an hour to review this.
Okay.
I have a question, Vice Chairman as well, and Chairman, relative to policies and procedures, and this is for Gordon. Gordon, is there a written policy relative of how we are reporting, how they're supposed to be reporting? And if so, is that something that is across the board for everyone, or are these organizations kind of crafted a different contract? And so I'll give you an example. We'll use one of the special appropriations as an example. Are they having to provide a receipt with regards to what they've paid for the approval that we've made, or what does that look like?
I might need to refer this over to Kyle and Kimberly, who handle this from the budget end.
Sure. So the contracts they're very similar. I mean, we do use the same template. There are some organizations that there are very few actually that do it on a monthly basis. Most of them are quarterly, and what they will do is they will submit, when they submit either a monthly or quarterly request for reimbursement, they'll submit backup documentation as far as what happened in that, whether it was a quarter or a month.
And who makes that determination? So I'm wanting to know if there's a policy that you guys have written in the budget about that. And if there is a policy, what organizations do you decide the policy is used for that type of mechanism?
I mean, I think our default is really to go to a quarterly reimbursement, and then it's, if an organization requests monthly, which I think there's only one, I think, that is on a monthly basis. We'll take it, and usually I think we've brought it to the manager's office and asked, do you want to is it okay to do this on a monthly basis, or?
But it's not a written policy, it's just something
Not
that
that
you
I
guys
know of.
kind of decide on.
That's right.
It's a hardship, yeah. I mean, so it was a finance rule around a certain threshold that would go quarterly. That was kind of out there, and then if there was a hardship that was deemed, that for some
Okay, so
reason,
the
then
organization
I would
has to-
approve the hardship
Okay.
change to that, and so,
All
but I think most of them were, like Kyle said, most of them are quarterly, really by policy, and then in one case there was a hardship or whatever. So.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you.
I had two quick questions, Mr. Chairman, if it's time. The contract, Gordon, that you referred to, that was forwarded to these agencies, is it explaining that contract basically what the reporting cycle or requirements are initially?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then I have a math question. I'm trying to add up my numbers correctly here, Kyle, so help me out, please. It looks like the funding balance was 1.17 million that we tapped into to do option 2. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's all, that's
That's the
exactly
total.
right. That's correct.
And so that leaves us remaining funding balance of roughly how much? Ballpark figure, not detailed.
Well, I'm not sure what our fund balance, what our remaining fund balance is, but when we get to the, so when Terry, when FY20 is closing out and Terry is working on the audit, she will go through and she'll identify what needs to be, reserved and restricted. And, the biggest part of it is we've got to have 14% fund balance.
Right.
And then, so once she identifies all of the fund balances that have to be reserved and restricted, committed based on policies of the board or state statute, we get to she'll get to a number that'll basically say, okay, this is what we have left over that's in excess of that 14%, and that's that PAYGO number.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what our fund balance number will be, but like Dudley said, with the increased revenues that we've had this year and with all the vacancies that we've had this year, we're pretty confident that we'll have a significant PAYGO number for next year. And so it would just,
So could we
essentially this-
ballpark figure, say we have at least a couple of $1 million left in fund balance?
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
And so essentially what the option two budget is, it goes ahead and appropriates some of that anticipated fund balance in the current, going into the next year. Whatever's left over will be dealt with when we close out the fiscal year with pay, and we know what that number is based on the real number based on the audit. So,
Got one additional question on, this is back on the manager's recommended alternative service levels for the full-time maintenance technician that is listed there. We talked yesterday some about exploring the possibility of working with TROSA in that. And I'd somehow like to capture that we are going to do that and not just approve the position.
okay. Actually, when the conversation started, I wrote a number 6 board-directed initiative to address that. And so I will, it's not on your page because I wrote it while we were talking.
I
and,
looked at that.
Yeah, and so I actually wrote one that says evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of contracting a portion of grounds maintenance services for selected county facilities. Management's directed to bring a recommendation to the board in first quarter of the new fiscal year.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you. That's good stuff. All righty. So, what we, obviously today's not a day, it's a briefing session, so we're not really in a position to vote, and we still have some work to do to get the 2 ordinances together. And so if what I'm hearing correctly, if it sounds like we're in a place where we can take the option 1 and option 2, build budget ordinances around option 1 and option 2, and have those here for you tomorrow at 2 o'clock for consideration. And so at that point in time, the board will be able to make a motion for either option 1 or option 2. We'll have both of those ordinances set, ready to go, and then however that vote plays out. Is that satisfactory with the board, and am I hearing that correctly?
Are you going to, do you propose to address the fire tax situation tomorrow?
So we are prepared now to actually talk through the fire tax district recommendations. We can go ahead and do that now.
Do you need direction today, or since we're going to vote on the budget tomorrow, does that prolong the situation for you to get a budget document ready if we make the decision on that tomorrow?
So I am prepared. I have, just in conversations that I've heard in talking with board members yesterday, I know there is some interest in changing the recommendations from the manager's recommendation, and I can present what I think I heard yesterday, or I can just present the manager's recommendations and let board members talk specifically about where they want to go with those.
Well, if when you get close to done with what you're going to do today or have ready for today, I still request 1/2 an hour recess.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this then? I think that makes some sense. Why don't we review the board directed initiatives that I have, and then also review the items to be considered for PAYGO funding. And then I'll talk a little bit about I'll let Gordon probably talk more about structure of how we're going to have to set up the board actions tomorrow. Then we'll take a recess, come back, and then we can talk through fire tax districts. So all right. No, thank you, Kyle.
Manager, possible, keep someone push this button. If it's possible that if Gordon is going to give some guidance on conflict of interest and what votes we need to abstain, can we get that today as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. I think we have that pretty much lined up, so unless we missed anything. So that will be part of that structured discussion. So, all right, so next item really is board directed initiatives. It's an entire section of the, no, not for me, okay. It's an entire section of the budget, and it's pretty important, frankly, because every time we go into these board discussions, we hear from board members things that they want to see addressed as we move forward. And so I've got 5 of them here. I've actually got 7 of them because I wrote 2 more while I was just listening to that last conversation. So I'll present those as well. The first one, and what we're hearing from the board, is you want us to present information detailing debt capacity, including 2/3 bonds and unissued general obligation bonds, as a strategy to address increased project costs for various construction projects and evaluate the timing of the next bond referendum to take advantage of the scheduled decreases in the debt leveling tax rates. I kind of envision that as a morning discussion as we head into what the 2/3 bonds that we know we're going to issue this year and what the capacity is, and really do a look back at the 16 referendum capacity and see what that arrangement looks like. So it's kind of a deep dive as we go into what is sort of the normal debt issuance for the every other year like we've done. And I think at the same time we'll be able to bring information about where the schools are with some of their projects. I think they met yesterday and actually talked about sort of their strategies as they get this last tranche of the FY16 bond. So a lot to do with bonds. Hopefully that captured that. The second one is to develop an implementation strategy related to the Lockton study and recommendations for recruitment and sign-on incentives, and present back to the board in the first quarter of fiscal year 2022-2023. What I added there is we had the Lockton study, but I also heard through the discussions that the recruitment sign-on incentives need to be a part of that. And so we are working on that, and we'll get that to you as quickly as we can, recognizing that we're in a pretty tough market. Item 3 is to continue to enhance strategic planning efforts by incorporating improved operational metrics. That is kind of an ongoing thing we've done every year, and we're trying to improve it each year as we go. And our strategic plan is presented each year, and we will do that as well. The fourth one heard kind of bubbled up out of the fire tax district discussions. That is to convene a meeting with both elected and appointed leadership from the town of Louisville and Forsyth County, and the board leadership from the Louisville Volunteer Fire Department, to discuss advantages and disadvantages of a future transition from a volunteer department to a municipal department. So I heard that as something that's kind of part of where we are in the life cycle of Louisville as a community, actually. Item 5 is to develop agenda items for the board's consideration related to the County Fire Overlay District once the year-end reconciliation is completed. Potential items for consideration include emergency vehicle purchases and enhanced efforts to promote volunteerism in the system. We believe there's going to be a fund balance in that there, and I think sort of a focused effort on how those fund balances are spent is important. Item 6, which I scribbled on the paper, I just read it, really is advantages and disadvantages of contracting a portion of grounds maintenance services. So bring that back. We'll show the cost, and it will show the cost of what it costs to us to provide it as a county government, and we'll make sure that the cost that we present to you will be the cost that, if you decide to contract, that they offset, that they reduce. And so I know a lot of times, in that, that's a pretty comprehensive piece of work, because you really are talking about what cost you're really avoiding on the county side, and you got to be honest about that. So, and then item 7, I don't have the exact language, but I do want to add some language in there about expectations from the board about what we, the reporting we get back from the special appropriations, and I really want to understand and kind of make sure that I capture what you want to see back from that. I don't think I'm hearing you want us to have each agency that you provide funding come in here during the year and do that, but I am hearing that you want us to make sure that we share with you what they've been able to accomplish with the county dollars.
I think an online report that every agency, so it's not hard to find, negotiate, and navigate. They're just like it would be like a publication. I think making it into a written report that you give us, I think is just way too, is wasteful. But I think having an online report and let us know it's there, maybe not just an email, but a couple, just a reminder that we have this now, we can all take a look at it and see it. And it'd be great to have that before we do this again next year.
Yeah.
So we could look at what people did and accumulate that in May and take a look at it in May, and then we'd be ready for this time.
I'm almost hearing something that the community sees as well. I mean, this is
Yeah,
not
that'd be
secret
great.
information.
I mean,
so-
that's great.
Okay, that sounds like a Map Forsyth, Jason Snipes budget collaborative project, so that'd be good.
I also have one just sort of question on number 2, and that is more, I'm just talking about communication with employees. I think they need to know this is going on and that there's money set aside for this. Just to let them know and to get an idea. Do you think we'll finish that by the end of the first quarter of the new fiscal year?
I am hopeful.
And can that be a part of one of your communications to employees to say, in case you didn't know, we have this Lockton study that's really looking at reclassification issues on globally, comparison of this, that, and the other. We hope to look at that in the first 3 months of the fiscal year and hopefully to have those implemented by October 1, something like that.
Yeah. I can do that after y'all pass the budget tomorrow. So that money will be there. So, and absolutely look forward to doing that. So, very good. I want to do that. It is a, there will be folks who, I want to make sure I don't create wrong expectations across all the departments across that.
But your communication helps to prevent that.
Yeah, I just don't want the expectations to be there's going to be big salary increases for folks. I anticipate the communication saying, the board funded a strong level of performance appraisal dollars. That they do know and understand what that system means, to their annual compensation, and the strength of that has been, we tell employees that based on your annual performance evaluation, if you do better in these areas, you'll do better overall, and you'll see a higher compensation adjustment the next year. And we can say that because y'all funded it every year. And so there's sort of that, if you do this, this will happen. And so, so I certainly want to communicate. I don't want to get lost. The best thing for employees across the board in this budget is a really good, well-funded performance appraisal, performance-based pay enhancement for employees. The Lockton study hopes to deal with the, with the issues we have around competitiveness in the marketplace. So there's that.
Yeah, I was. I just think that this Lockton study is a pretty important issue for impact to employees this year.
Absolutely.
And it's not likely to be changed again until we do another sort of big kind of review like that.
Right.
So it's making some long-term adjustments that will stay in place for a while. And it is about whatever in the budget, $5.9 million, dollars that will be invested into, employees.
Yeah.
That they don't know about after the budget is approved today. When that happens, like on July, in their first check in July, nothing's showing up relative to that.
That's
and
correct.
that's what I'm really getting at, showing them.
Yeah.
OSB, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Understand, we'll develop some communication and hopefully it's received well. So, all right. If between now and tomorrow, when we present, if there's something else you want us to capture in the board directed initiatives piece, let me or let Kyle know, or Chantel or Damon or anybody. We're good. Okay on this? All right, let's take a look at items considered for PAYGO funding. And these really bubbled up a couple different places. Obviously, they bubbled up through the two options, and then there were some other ideas as well. So, and I tried to put the ones on the top of the list are the ones that bubbled up out of the options. So, and obviously, this isn't saying that any of this is going to get funded. What it's saying is here are some items that are kind of automatically considered when we close out the fiscal year, and we know what that number is, and then we try to make decisions around that. And so hopefully I've captured what I think I heard the board say. Tanglewood Park Wi-Fi improvements, $175,000. Heard a lot of support for that. Electrification of fleet, that number has been reduced from a number that we had in an earlier presentation, and it matches up with what was in the alternate service level that the board was interested in. Security cams at Recycling Convenience Center, 6,300, pretty easy thing to do.
Dudley, I have a question about the security cameras.
Yeah.
Commissioner Elamine and I were having some conversation, and he wanted to confirm whether or not our security systems in the parking, am I speaking for you?
Right. You're correct.
Was available, it was working. And I thought that I've seen it, but I just needed to confirm that.
In this building?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, I don't see anybody from General Services. I can get you the,
Oh, no, we just wanted to make sure it was working, that's all.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Manager, on the electric
Thank you
fleet,
very much.
if your electric fleet works well, better than I think it might, I'm going to acknowledge that it did. And if it don't work as well as you think it will, I want you to acknowledge to it didn't. Will you agree to that? We don't have to put it in writing, but I just want to see if you'll agree to that.
I will
I'm
definitely-
taking
I
a
will-
risk. I'm taking risks, so I want to see if you will.
I will definitely agree to that.
Okay.
And I
More
hope,
power to
You
you.
got witnesses. I don't need to have it in writing.
that is now in perpetuity. That is right, so. All right. Well, now I'm scared to say the rest of them. I don't know. That's right.
Take your oath, take your oath.
Okay, so the fourth item was some photovoltaic, solar, and other projects at county parks and facilities for $100,000. Tree risk mitigation at parks for $100,000. Additional funding from Multipurpose Agricultural Center at $5 million. That is actually in addition to the legislative request that we hope we have some success with, which would really move that whole project forward. We will be bringing that back to you here early in the fiscal year around.
And it's in addition to the FY16 bond.
There you go. Yeah, it is. So there's
Addition to,
pretty
yeah.
substantial.
So
That
you
would
got-
get
you
us.
got kind of, if this were approved, it's kind of 10 million plus legislative.
Yeah, I think the number gets up around $17 million, which is the, which is a full build out of cooperative extension and the Ag Center.
Okay.
LEDC capital maintenance, we had a study that looked over about 10 years and identified about $10 or $12 million worth of improvements at the LEDC that really needed to be made. What this does is really funds those outside. We would have normally expected the 2/3 bonds for general services to handle that, and this really advance covers some of that so that there's a little pressure off the 2/3 bonds for other county facilities. Behavioral health emergency services, kind of Howland Avenue beautification, that is $2.5 million. It takes into account improvements as we bring that campus together and try to make it be a sort of singular human services campus. It has some elements that Commissioner McDaniel is going to bring to you around her hopes and dreams around that, and so we are working on that. That's also an ARPA request that has some elements in that, and so we'll bring that to you. Economic development reserves and economic development projects, I really kind of put those together. One of them kind of focused more on the airport, but for the purpose of this, when you see it the next time, it'll probably have about $6 million just in economic development reserve. And then the last piece of it is really inflation contingency for county and Winston Center for Schools capital projects. And I just sort of said the balance of 14%. What I know going into next year right now is, while we do have a lot of one-time dollars, we know that the expectation due to inflation is that the capital projects that the schools are dealing with, they are not able to get all those done that were in that FY6 in the 16 bond referendum. And so that is starting to become clear as we issue this last debt. So I think there's going to be work that really needs to be done between the school board and between this board around what that looks like. I think that impacts future bond issuances, obviously, and future referendum that might be placed on the ballot. And so, it may be a board-directed initiative, although I'm a little reluctant to put it in there that way because I'm not sure what shape it's going to take. I think it depends on what our year-end looks like. And then, obviously, Darrell Walker is working on where they see their shortfall, how they're going to respond to that. And so you'll see that in the news media. So hopefully I've captured.
Could I add one thing? I'd like to have some kind of update on the Tanglewood Clubhouse, and I hope what I'm hearing isn't true, that we may have to cut back on it, because I feel that that's a revenue-producing project, and I would like to see it be the very best it could be.
So as of today, we are at 95% CDs. So basically, they're about done. The construction documents are about done. And so they will put those out on the street for bids. And then we have an actual number. We had stopped shrinking it. It's smaller than the current facility, but it's a lot more efficient. There's a lot of wasted space in the current one. So it'll appear bigger because of the space that will be used by patrons. But we stopped shrinking it. At some point, I think I came to the board members and said, we can keep shrinking it, or we can, stop where we are, and that's what we did. So we'll have real prices shortly.
And we'll have some bid alternates in there that let you make a decision about if you wanted to fund a bid alternate or not. And so
Could we add that to the PAYGO?
We can add it to PAYGO. We do have some inflation reserve, and the inflation contingency for the county. Really, that's what we were trying to get at, is inflation contingency for county facilities and schools.
I just
If you want me to write Tanglewood
I
Park.
would like for you to do that.
All right, I will have an option that actually has Tanglewood Clubhouse in it. Yes, ma'am, I will do that.
Commissioner Kaplan has a comment.
No, he doesn't.
On PAYGO, sorry, control room. Okay, so on PAYGO, where I'm forced to go, I think I'd like to see PAYGO add the RJR football stadium on here. I know several of the board members here have told me, the parents promised to build it, they came before us, and yada, yada, yada. But this stadium is for the kids, not the parents, and those parents probably don't even have kids there anymore. So I'd like to see some comment about that. They have already gotten some major contributions. This will take them to another major contribution and pretty much fund the thing. So about $500,000 is what it was. And if that can be put on there, I know we'd have to vote on it separately later, but at least it would be there and we can see how it goes from there.
Nowhere.
All right, anything else?
I agree with I called you Senator, Commissioner Kaplan.
Okay.
I had one question.
Yes, sir.
It's okay, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. This 14% sort of contingency for inflation, that's in addition to the 14% fund balance that we're required to maintain?
Yeah, that is confusing. I apologize. All I meant there was just the balance of 14%.
The balance,
Yeah.
okay.
So if fund balance comes in, it's 15 million, and then these projects are added up, I would just, we would
I got you.
sort of, that is an important number, but it's, it also is, the shortfall, I think, is going to would consume all of PAYGO too. So.
And just one comment to congratulate you and the staff on these two proposals, option 1 and 2, because my world was built around inflation at one point, but then it was supply and demand or cost push, it's a whole different ballgame now to try to anticipate what inflation is going to be. So congratulations for your hard work in presenting to us two options.
Thank you. Your work is what, we just responded to your work, so. Alrighty, so we've got 2 items for the base budget. We've got board directed initiatives and pay-go. Gordon, you want to talk a little bit about what we'll need to act on first and how that'll need to happen?
Yes, as you know, effective on January 1st of this year, the General Assembly enacted a conflicts statute relating to local boards. It's 14-234.3. And basically what it says is if you commissioners serve on a nonprofit board, you can't discuss or vote on any contract relating to that nonprofit board. Where that comes into play here is that in the continuation budget portion of special appropriations, there are 3 nonprofits on which one commissioner is a board member. Those are Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership, United Way, the Housing Matters Program, and Caladium. And so what that would mean is if the budget were presented, as we've done in past years, 3 of you would not be able to discuss or vote on that. And so that obviously is unacceptable. And so what we're proposing to do is to give you the budget as it is with those 3 stripped out, but a reserve in the budget. And so all 7 of you could vote on the budget. And then when the budget passes, we can individually bring before you budget ordinance amendments for each of those 3. So you would vote tomorrow on the budget, and then there would be 3 budget ordinance amendments. One of you would have to recuse him or herself on each of those. And if there are any others that we've somehow missed, we don't think we have, but if there are any others that we've missed that you see in the special appropriations where you are a board member, please let us know as soon as possible, and we'll do the same thing. So the end goal here is obviously to have maximum participation on the budget and still be able to address these other issues. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Gordon, could you share those organizations again?
The 3?
Yes.
Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership, United Way, Housing Matters, and Caladium. And I have the amounts if you'd like that.
And they're part of the regular budget?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, okay.
So
It's nothing that's changed for this year. None of the
I got it.
additional special appropriations, we didn't find any conflicts there.
I'm assuming the downtown issue is a point for me. I'm trying to remember.
That's correct.
They only meet when we meet, so it's not even likely I can show up. I don't even know what they want, so that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be pretty straightforward. We were concerned that it was going to be more difficult than,
And let me make an editorial comment here. Having been a member of the legislature, they do tend to kill fleas with sledgehammers, and I think this is one of those things.
I think that's right.
That's pretty descriptive.
It's a good metaphor. It's a good metaphor.
All right, so really, except for fire tax districts, I think that takes care of everything we need to do to prepare ourselves for tomorrow. We do have one other little issue, and it's really just a timing issue, because I understand Commissioner Elmine, you're going to be participating remotely,
So am I.
and so you'll also be participating remotely.
I'm in Charlotte tomorrow.
Was there the possibility you could get back here?
No, it's a luncheon at 12:15, and I can be on the phone at 2.
Okay. All righty. So we will, anyway, just understand, we'll try to make the the structure of all those votes pretty straightforward and pretty simple. But it is a little more complicated because we will have two commissioners voting remotely. We'll have to do the announced roll call and all of that stuff. But we will muddle through that because my sense is everybody feels pretty comfortable with two options and then a motion to be made on one or the other, and then kind of goes from there. So.
Yeah, my intent is to be on Zoom, but we'll have to be aware of technical difficulties. But that's my intent.
Yeah.
To be on the Zoom call.
We will find out if this whole thing is cursed or not. So tomorrow at 2. So hopefully we have good. Good
Well, getting back to
communication.
Commissioner Linville's request to break for 30 minutes, do we still want to do that right now?
I think that would be it, and we'll come back and wrap things up with fire tax district.
Okay, we'll take a 30-minute break. Back at 10:35. Our 30-minute break has been completed, and we're refreshed and ready for more good news from our county manager, Dudley Watts.
All right, thank you. So I'll ask David Sanders Pratt, our deputy manager, to come up. He does all the heavy lifting on fire tax districts every year, and so he's been intimately involved in this. So what I'll do is just ask Damon to go through the data around the fire tax districts. I don't know that we need to go into every single one of them, maybe just highlight the 4 that actually had requested increases this year. There's 5 because one of them's a dual district. But talk about what they requested and then what we recommended, and then we can really just open it up to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So as a recap of what we talked about at your workshop, this is a rundown of all the departments, but we'll focus on the ones that are in the respective rectangles, which actually ask for increases in the current fiscal year. So the first is Gumtree, and so this just shows you the current tax base estimate. Their FY22 rate, the current rate's 10 cents, and then they requested to go up 2 3/4 cents to 12.75 cents, and then the recommendation was for 12 cents. And what they wanted to do with this 2 3/4 cent increase was it would combat their loss of volunteer firefighters, so the struggle that they're all having, by going from 10 hours per day, 5 days a week, part-time coverage, to 24 hours per day, 7 days a week coverage, which basically is going to cover around the clock, 365, as opposed to basically the day shift, Monday through Friday. And then they noted offset rising fuel costs as well. And then they noted that Davidson County, the recommendation from the manager's office at this point was 2 3/4 cent to Davidson County's leadership there. The next request was from Louisville Volunteer Fire Department. You can see their tax base there, 2.1 billion. And then you come over to the current tax rate of 8 cents. The request was for 9 cents. The recommendation was 8.5 cents. You can see the 2 respective yields. And so the difference is in this last column of $109,000 from the recommend and the request. That's the difference. And what they were requesting was an increase in their personal services, basically, of 34.7%. And then what the recommend would do was basically provide enough for an equivalent increase of 10%, which is what the county employees is budgeted for. If you take the 5% from last year, 5% this year, about 10%. And then with the recommended rate, there's still a little bit of room to probably go a little above 10%. But that was the request was to go from 8 to 9, and the recommendation was for actually 0.5 cent. The third request was from Salem Chapel. You can see their tax base of $103 million, and their current rate is 11 9/100 cent. They're requesting to go to 14, which would have brought their yield to $144,186. And then I was recommending a 12 1/4 cent, basically, and that gives them $126,000. You can see the difference there. What they were requesting was a volunteer incentive, which is basically to incentivize people to volunteer. A resident incentive. What the resident incentive does is entice somebody to live at the firehouse to help them have staff available to respond to events. And then they had some increases in materials and supplies of 47%, repair services 48%, and so forth. And so what the recommended rate would do would be allow for increases in materials and supplies and other purchase services similar to the county increase, which is basically 12% in those categories. Union Cross, they have a tax estimate of $329 million, tax base estimate. Their current rate was 12 cents. They're requesting a 2 cent increase to 14. The recommendation was for 12 3/4 cents. And you can see the difference between the revenue from the request and the recommend. And what Union Cross was seeking was to set aside money to replace a 1993 Pierce pumper tanker, salary adjustments, and then increases in materials and supplies of around 34%, repair services at 66%, contractual services at 13%. And so what the recommended rate would do would be allow for increases in materials and supplies, repairs, services, and contractual services, again, similar to the county budget, and allow them to set aside some money, not the total amount that they had, but a sinking fund for truck replacement. So those were the recommendations on the 4 departments. West Bend is a district that's served by Louisville. So similar to the 8-cent rate currently, it would go up to 9 if they got their request. And the recommendation was for an increase of 8.5 cents. And then you can see what the difference is between the recommend and the requested revenue. And that's a summary of what the request and recommendation was for the departments who asked for increases in the FY23 budget.
And we do have Fire Marshal Gary Stires back there. We also have representatives from some of the departments as well, if you got any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
are you finished? Okay. I got some suggestions in regard to the request, and before I start into it, there are some changes that I suggest, and that does not reflect that the staff, and in particular Damon, has done any miscalculations. I think they've done, as you hear sometimes, better than okay. So I'll start from here, and then as I go through, if there's any comments on any particular one, just state that, and then when I get to the end of it, if there's any additional comments or changes you think ought to be made from what I'm suggesting, open to hear it. So Gumtree, Damon done been over them all. My suggestion is the increase would be 2.25, and that would put their rate at $12.25. Louisville, they've requested a rate of 9. The recommended rate is 8.5, which increases it by 1/2. So their rate would be 8.5. In Salem Chapel, their requested was 14. It was recommended at a 1.16 increase, and I'm suggesting that their increase be as they asked, and that increase is 2.91 cents. It puts it up to 14. And I would remind you that Salem Chapel is, they do the best they can with the they all do good, but Salem Chapel does the best they can with the resources that they have, and their total budget, I believe, is right around $103,000. Penny just brings them in $299. It's been about 5-6 years ago. I can't recall exactly. Maybe a little bit more. We increased their rate. I don't think it's been adjusted much since then, of 3 cents, just to get them one 8-hour paid person. And so with this, they can, it will help them to provide the services that they've been doing, hopefully easier and maybe better. Union Cross, their request was 14 cents, and our suggestion is on that one is to increase it by 1.5, and that would put the rate at 13.5. So if anybody has any, commissioners have any different thoughts or suggestions or any comments, I'd like to hear them, and I would, what I've gone over, I would recommend that that's what we do.
Any comments from the commissioners on Commissioner Linville's suggestions?
I'd like to move that we accept the recommendation of Commissioner Linville.
Motion by,
We're not taking any action today.
I forgot about that. It's a briefing today.
We're not taking action today.
Okay, that's right. It's a
let
briefing.
me ask, we have some firemen in the back. I don't know if you're related to everything that Commissioner Linville has talked about. I'm not setting up a debate, but you heard what he had to say. Do you have any disagreement to that from a volunteer or fireman's point of view? Okay, so far, Richard, it sounds to me like you're home free. Everyone liked what you had to
Well,
say.
hopefully, everybody won't be totally satisfied, I doubt. I understand that, and so
Okay.
it's a,
Yes, ma'am.
This is in Salem Chapel. I know they really need some help. Would they qualify for some of the ARPA funds, or is it too late to apply?
So if I could interject, the county fire department's working on an application coordinating with some of the departments who did not receive apparatus through the state funding, of which they're one, to submit an ARPA application for a pumper tanker or a pumper, one of the two, probably a pumper tanker.
That's good to know.
I have a question about the ARPA funding, and I know this is probably offbeat a little bit, but I just need to know where we are in terms of the 80%.
So
that
we were,
report
yeah,
when-
we were right at 80% when we finished round one. And so obviously round two, the applications closed Friday.
Oh, Friday, okay.
And so we'll start seeing those as soon as we can wade through them and see what we get. So
Thank
couple things, in addition to the ARPA, to the ARPA strategy around the volunteer fire system, we did request legislatively, so hopefully something will play out there. And then the last item I was just going to mention, because when we prepare these and put these, and we'll put these recommendations in both of the options of ordinances that you consider tomorrow. West Bend does flow with Louisville, so that will, the Louisville West Bend rate will be the same.
And since we have no firm objections, we can take Commissioner Linville's recommendations as recommendations for the whole board and vote on it at tomorrow's meeting.
That's right. We will include those in both of the options in the base budget.
Good, okay.
So we'll do that. So anything else? Did I miss anything from staff? Chantel, Gordon, Terry, Damon?
I think, Chantel, obviously you've got something that you want to say. Nothing?
Well, let me thank you. I just want to thank the board for, the budgeting year is really year-round, and so the process, I appreciate your willingness to help shape this community the way you do. And so we will have some options for you tomorrow.
I think it went well. Everything went well today.
That's all we have.
I had one question, Dudley, Mr. Chairman, just one question quickly. I got a call about another orientation from the ARPA fund allocations. Is that scheduled? Is that to be done or not being done, or what's the status of that? For those who would like to apply, they missed the first round of orientation meetings, and I didn't really know what to tell them, so I'm asking the staff what the status is on that. Will there be another orientation meeting?
We had lots of conversations about trying to do one here at the tail end of the process, knowing that folks are trying to get under that. Do we know if there is one scheduled?
Tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Tomorrow at 2 p.m., okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Noon on Friday.
On Friday.
So I would direct folks to call Community and Economic Development and inquire. We are trying to accommodate folks who want to try to get an application in, and they do need to do that orientation, so.
You know, Commissioner Kaplan mentioned a moment ago, and I think he was absolutely on the money, that none of this could have taken place today or yesterday or what it's going to be in the next few days had it not been for the staff, for Dudley Watts and for his folks. And you're to be congratulated on a job well done, because I actually understand what's going on. I think.
Yeah, I want to second that. A lot of hard work by staff on this. I got a little idea what's going into putting this together. It's a lot of work, and appreciate the opportunities to discuss it.
We have any further business? So we're gone for the day until tomorrow.
Be back here tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
2 p.m.
Either here or remotely. It sounds like we'll have
Okay.
have some remote.
Any further comments from the commissioners?
Commissioner Kaplan moved to adjourn.
Commissioner Kaplan has moved to adjourn. I'll second the motion. We're adjourned.